Okay, John, can you see my presentation screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can go into full screen mode to eliminate.
I think this first slide is just a little smaller.
Okay.
Oh, maybe not. Let's see.
If not, that's all right. It's just I was trying to eliminate people on the side, but that's good that you have your video on. You're welcome to share it throughout the presentation if that's what you choose to do.
It's up to you. I can turn it off or leave it on, whichever one you prefer.
Oh no, totally up to you. All right, I have 6:30. We are recording, and you can begin whenever.
All right. So I hope everyone else can hear online. Good evening. We're going to talk a little bit about private water wells, some basic information. This is kind of a talk that I give whenever we do a screening for water wells. By screening, I mean we come into your local area, counties, and do a water quality test for your well. We will look at bacterias, we will look at nitrates, we look at the total dissolved solids, salinity, TDS. So it's kind of the talk that I give whenever we do that program. I was talking with John before the meeting here. We would like to come into Brazoria County at some point, so hopefully before too long we can coordinate with your county extension office and get into Brazoria County to do this water quality testing for private water wells. So, but I will cover just a few things here this afternoon or this evening. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. We will try to get those covered. So information that I really think that you need to know about your private water well if you do have one. We need to record the location of your private water well with GPS coordinates. If Brazoria County is anything like the rest of Texas, and I'm sure it is, property is changing hands rather quickly. Gone are the days when we can use landmarks to tell a well owner or somebody that goes out to fix your private water well. If the pump goes out, you need to get it fixed. You can't use those landmarks. The big oak tree, the red barn, things like that are just not there anymore. That property has changed hands. So the new owners either chopped down the tree or they painted the barn or they've done something silly out there. So GPS locations are a constant. We can always find those. Every one of us probably carries a handheld GPS phone in our pocket all the time. So those are easy to take those readings nowadays. I also want to make sure that you have a well log for your private water well. And a lot of you are probably going, what is that? And we will cover that here shortly. So it's very pertinent information. It tells me lots of things about your well. It will tell you lots of things about your well. Also, if you are a property owner and you're thinking about drilling a water well, I'm going to give you a few hints and a few things about drilling water wells. Also, we need to make sure that if you're drilling a well or going to have a well drilled, that you contact your local groundwater conservation district. There in Brazoria County, it is the Brazoria County Groundwater Conservation District, and they will give you the paperwork and the permission to get that well drilled. So they are very pertinent to getting a well put into your location. The acronyms at the bottom of the page, TWDB, Texas Water Development Board, and TCEQ are entities across the state that are important, but not so much with what we're going to talk about this evening. So a little bit of information for those guys here in a few minutes, but not a whole lot. Okay, a well log. This well log is from a well that was drilled in Real County, Leakey, Texas. Anybody familiar with Leakey out in the western edge of the hill country? Okay, this well was drilled in 2004. If you look at the top of this well log page, you see that it does have GPS coordinates, that longitude and latitude. It also tells us right there in the middle of the page what the geology was as they were drilling this hole. From 0 to 2 feet, there was black dirt. From 2 to 28, there was caliche that was found. This well turned out to be 627 feet deep. And if you keep looking down at item number 15, it says water test. This well yielded 60 gallons per minute. So before I came on with the extension service, I was the general manager for the Real Edwards Conservation Reclamation District, which is the groundwater district in Leakey and Rock Springs. So I can tell you that a well that is 627 feet deep in the hill country and yields 60 gallons per minute is not a common thing in that area. Typically, wells are drilled in that. If you're close to the river, it's probably less than 50 feet. If you're out in the middle of the county, it's usually around 300 to 350 feet. And most wells in that area, well, again, by the river, you may get these yields of 50 to 60 gallons per minute because you're using Frio River water or Nueces River water. But out in the middle of a county, 60 gallons per minute is very, very rare. Typically, a well in Real County is going to be 5 to 10 gallons per minute. Now, the aquifer that you're in there in Brazoria County, Gulf Coast, you're going to have yields like this. You've got production agriculture, you've got center pivots, you've got things going on. So there is more plentiful groundwater than there is out in the western part of the hill country. Okay, other pertinent information that I see on this well log, at the very bottom of the page, it does tell us who drilled it and what their license number and the date that that well was completed. So pertinent information in a well log, the well number, the owner and location information, which is at the top, well construction and driller information, which is in the middle of this thing, any kind of well testing data, and any kind of geologic formation. So I find those very important. The reason I'm going to say that is, as much as property transfers and changes hands, if you bought a new piece of property and you don't have a well log for your well, you get to see about 1 foot of casing sticking out of the ground is about all you see. You don't know for sure how deep it is. You're going on the word of the person you bought it from, of a realtor. So sometimes you don't get totally accurate information. A well log is going to tell you what happened when the driller was drilling this well. There are people across the state of Texas, if you can imagine, that are not totally honest when it comes to doing labor and work for you. So use an example, a piece of pipe that goes into a well is about 20 foot deep. So if you've got a 300-foot well, you should have about 15 joints of pipe that go into your well. So that'd cover 300 feet if the pipe went all the way from surface to the bottom of the hole, which we don't want your pump at the bottom because we don't want to be sucking in sand or dirt or anything else. So typically we don't want our pump at the very bottom of our hole. So a hole that is 300 foot deep would only hold 15 joints of pipe to get us down to that 300 feet. So let's just say your pump goes out in your well. Somebody comes by and gives you a bid to fix it for you. They tell you, well, it looks like everything's in pretty bad shape. We're going to have to replace the pipe. We're going to have to replace our pump. I think it's going to take, whenever they start pulling stuff out, it's going to take us 25 joints of pipe to fill in your 300-foot well. With 25 joints of pipe, you should be able to go 500 feet. So where are they putting that extra 200 feet of pipe that they're charging you for? So, but if you don't know how deep your well is, then you gladly pay that bill because they got water to the house again, water to the cattle, water to your crops, whatever you're trying to do. So if you don't know how deep your well is, you don't know that you could be taken advantage of. So it's always good to have as much information about your well as possible. If you're like me, we're not getting any younger every day. At some point, we're either going to sell our property or we're going to give it to our kids or our grandkids. And as y'all all know, the kids and grandkids don't know much about the well, about the property. They don't pay much attention. So a well log would give them vital information about the well, about what's going on around the home. So a very good, useful piece of paper that I would love for you to find and have available for your well if you sell your property or you give it to those kids or those grandkids. Okay, this map is part of the Water Development Board's Groundwater Data Interactive site. You see the website there at the bottom of the page. Okay, so you notice how New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana kind of looks like they're just a green, white, green shade, and how Texas kind of looks like it has a purple or orange cast to it. Okay, so I told this map that we want to go to Angleton, Texas, and if we click on the little search engine there, it pulls it up a little bit tighter. So you notice now as we get in tighter to Angleton, you see the orange, purple, and little orange dots with X's in them. These are all private water wells. So if I move back the screen, every one of those color variations there is the intensity of the private water wells across the state. So instead of being out like in the Big Bend where it's nice and green and white, you can tell across Texas that Houston, Harris County, Fort Bend County, Brazoria County, it looks to me like there are quite a few private wells drilled into the Gulf Coast aquifer out there. Okay, so if we find, again, this is here in Angleton. So if we click on the ones with X's, those are wells that have been plugged. They're no longer in use. You can't pull water out of them. They've been capped or plugged. They're no longer viable water wells, so we're not pulling water out of those. The orange ones and the purple ones are the wells that are actually still being utilized. So if we click on one of those dots, so you can go to your neighborhood, to your house. If you don't have a copy of your well log and you've got a well, you can go in there and pull it in close and see if your well log happens to be on this site. Anything that's drilled from probably early 2000s till today should be on this map. One of the responsibilities of a water well driller is to write the well log up, give a copy of it to you as the person that paid for the well, give a copy of it to the groundwater conservation district within the county, and also file one with the state of Texas so that it gets put onto this map. Okay, so if we find one of these wells, I randomly found one here that says it's a new well, public water supply, Brazoria County, city of Angleton in Freedom Park. So it also says this well is 925 feet. So if I click on the little blue hyperlink at the top of the page here, it brings up a well log. Again, owner, city of Angleton, gives us longitude and latitude of that well. It tells us that this well was drilled in January of 2016. Bottom depth of the hole is 780 feet. Pump depth, so the pump is set at 300 feet, so that means we've got about 400 and 450 feet of water below the pump. Okay, so folks, if you have a water well, you never want that well or that pump to be at the bottom of the hole. You always want to have a little bit of space to lower the pump. We're all getting more and more neighbors, more and more folks moving into Texas every day. So we want to make sure that we have room to lower our pump as the water tables do go down. East Texas, where y'all are at, you do get some drought, but you don't get near what's going on out in El Paso or out in Pecos out there where it really gets dry, where they haven't had a whole lot of rain. So typically your fluctuation in water levels doesn't move very much. Out west, we do see a lot more variation in water levels. You notice on the bottom of this well log page, it says that this well will yield 1,000 gallons per minute. And it has 119 feet of drawdown after 3 hours. So that is a phenomenal well with 1,000 gallons per minute. Is just, that's a staggering number for me coming from the hill country where we get 3 to 5 gallons per minute. So that's just, it's amazing. Again, on the second page of this well log, it's going to tell us who drilled the well, what the company was, who the person that actually drilled the water well. And then we go through at the bottom of the page, it goes through the geology of what happened. So 0 to 15 feet was clay, 15 to 61 sands, and all the way to the bottom of this hole from 648 to 750, there was a clay medium red. So it gives us lots of lithology, lots of geology of what's going on down that hole. Again, a water well is one of those things that you pay a lot of money for, but in reality, you get to see about a foot of pipe sticking out of the ground and maybe a little bit of concrete around it, but you don't get to see the other 500 or 600, 700 feet of casing that you buy and the pump that you buy and all the electrical wire. You just don't get to see much of it. So that investment is one of those things that you don't get to see and utilize to the full extent like you do your car or your house. So it's just, it's a weird kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, if you get onto that website, the Water Development Board, I'm going to scoot back there in case anybody wants to take notes on what that website is. Okay, so that website there, if you get on this site and you cannot find your well log, the first thing I would do there around Angleton is figure out who the drillers are and possibly find out who drilled that well. If you know who drilled it, you might reach out to that person and say, hey, I don't have a copy of my well log, or I can't find it. I don't know if I ever got one. Could you dig through your files and get me that well log so that I have information? So look to the website, find it, see if you can find it, then go to the driller. You also could reach out to the groundwater district there in Brazoria County and ask those folks that work for the Brazoria County groundwater district if they have a copy of the well log. If they do, they will happily make copies and share with you. Last ditch effort, if none of those things turn out to work for you, Heather Dotson, that works for Texas Water Development Board, is in charge of the databases for wells across the state. So if it's not on the map that I showed you, groundwater district doesn't have it, driller won't take time to look for it, this may be an alternative. She has some databases that are not necessarily on the map, but she may have some information to be able to get it for you. So talk bad about drillers for just a second. Drillers are really, really good at drilling water wells. Can y'all in your mind guess what a water well driller is really, really, really bad at? And if you guess paperwork, you guess correctly. They love to go out and drill holes and drill wells, but they hate to do the paperwork that's associated with it. They know that they're required to do it. They know they have to do it. It's just not their favorite thing. So it has to be a good rainy day, a good rainy week before they sit in the office and do paperwork. Otherwise, they're out in the field drilling those holes. Okay, so if you're thinking about getting a well drilled, I'm going to recommend to you that you get a licensed well driller to put that hole in the ground. Just because your best friend's brother-in-law owns a drilling rig and he's in Louisiana and he comes over here all the time to visit, doesn't mean that he may be the best person. He may be a great driller, but I'm going to say, if you have a well drilled in Texas, you want a licensed person to drill that. Okay, Texas Department of License and Regulation are the folks that give out those licenses for water well drillers, for pump installers, for elevator operators, for beauticians. So we go to the Texas Department of License and Regulation website, which you see here. We're going to go to the top license types, and we're going to search for a license. And we're going to go to the where it says inquire by license type. The very bottom option is water well drillers, pump installers. So we chose that. And then you can also choose by location, by city or zip code. I went ahead and kept it a little more broad than that and went in and we're going to search by county. And when we do that, we come up with a list of 33 drillers that are licensed within Brazoria County to drill private water wells. Okay, so if you look at the list of these folks that drill wells here, the ones that have a note here or that are in red that say inactive or expired, those are the folks that I probably would not use off of the list, because an expired or inactive license, that means they're not keeping up with their continuing education. They probably drill really well. They just let it lapse because they got busy. But if their license is not up to date and everything is not good, those are not the folks I would want on my property drilling a well for me. Okay. Also, one thing that I always look at is the guys that have the lowest numbers on their license number, 1827 here, 2065. Down at the bottom, you're looking at 56,037. The lower the number, the longer these guys have been drilling wells. That means they've got experience. They know what's going on. They've been doing this for a long, long time. So I'm going to pick one of these guys randomly here, and we're going to look at his license. So Mr. Rhodes in Rocherian, Brazoria County, his license number 1827, expiration date is 7/8 of 23, so he's still good through July. And if you look at what he is licensed to drill, it says A and I. So it says he is a master well driller, includes all designations previously listed. So if you look up above that, it says water wells, monitor wells, injection wells. He knows all of these things. He has done all of them. He has also got the I, which means he's a master water well pump installer, which includes all designation, windmills, single phase pumps, 3-phase pumps. So he has been working for a long time, has lots and lots of experience. So one of the drillers that I would probably, if I was living in the area, maybe one that I would contact and make sure or try to get to work on my spot. If you forget where this website is, you can always reach out to the groundwater district. They will give you a list of the drillers that are in the area. They are kind of like Texas A&M. We're not going to tell you who to choose. We're going to give you that list and let you make those choices on your own. But we'll give you a list of the people that we know in the area that are licensed and registered. So if you can't remember the website, that would be a good place to, the groundwater district is a good place to go ask questions. Okay, groundwater in the state of Texas. We have 9 major, 22 minor aquifers. There's estimated to be 3 to 4 billion acre feet of water underneath the state of Texas. Okay, an acre foot of water is approximately, well, imagine a football field, end zone to end zone, sideline to sideline. That is 1 acre of property. We put 1 foot of water on top of that football field. That would be an acre foot of water, which is about 326,000 gallons of water. So let's put 3 to 4 billion of those, and that is what we expect to find under the state of Texas. Okay, they estimate that there's 250 times as much groundwater as we have surface water. And living in East Texas where y'all are at, there's a lot of surface water. So if there's 250 times as much groundwater under the state as what y'all got over there, we got a lot of water to use up. Now, keep in mind, all of it is not real good water. Some of it is, in y'all's area, may be saline, unpotable because of the saltwater intrusion. But there is a lot of groundwater, and in some areas, they will use water that is not great because that's the only water that they do have. Okay, Environmental Protection Agency has set regulations for drinking water standards. Now, as a private water well owner, no one is going to come on your property. EPA rules don't apply. Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is not going to come to your farm, your ranch, your house and say, you have to make your water meet this standard before you can drink it. It has to be this good. Okay. Now, any city supply, any MUD or SUD or HUD or municipality, they are subject to drinking water regulations that Environmental Protection Agency, they set those standards, and TCQ is the state entity that makes sure that that is regulated and those rules are followed. So drinking water, the Federal Drinking Water or Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974 established the standards for surface and groundwater sources that are used for public water supplies. EPA set standards based on whether a contaminant harms human health, is known to occur in drinking water, and can be detected in drinking water. So TCQ is that enforcement arm of the EPA for the drinking water. Okay, public water systems are set to those standards for health reasons and for nuisance reasons. Okay, these can also be a guide, but again, no one's going to come onto your property and make sure that you are following this, that make sure that your well is in compliance with this. It's just a set of rules and regulations that we would like you to follow for your own health and safety. Okay, there's over 1 million private water wells across the state of Texas. About 10% of these wells contain fecal coliform bacteria. Okay, so you see the word there, fecal. If we're drinking water out of this well, how much fecal do we want in our private water well in that drinking water? Maximum contaminant level, what we are looking for is 0. We do not want any fecal coliform in that drinking water. Okay, 2 to 50% of the wells exceed nitrate maximum contaminant level depending on the region. Maximum contaminant level for drinking water standards is 10 parts per million of nitrates. Okay, Water Development Board 2003 to 2008 data points said that there was over 3,861 wells that tested positive or were over the maximum contaminant level for nitrates. Y'all's area could be prone to some nitrate issues with production agriculture. Over fertilization is one of the reasons for that. Some of the stuff is aquifer driven as well, but over fertilization could be one of the key components on why the nitrate levels are high. We'll go into that here shortly. Okay, iron and hydrogen sulfide, not harmful, but can be significant nuisances. Iron, none of us want to go into the bathroom and see a red or brown porcelain stool there, or a red or brown porcelain or bathtub, kind of have that tint to it. And none of us like to have that hydrogen sulfide or that rotten egg smell whenever we turn our water faucet on. So again, these are not harmful to our health, but they are significant nuisances, and we are very, very susceptible to the smell. We do not like that smell of hydrogen sulfide at all. Okay. In y'all's area, one of the things that could be an issue is water could be too salty for irrigation or livestock uses. Our vegetable crops are very susceptible to salinity. Livestock, the numbers have to be pretty high for it to affect our cattle, sheep, goats. So typically our vegetation will show signs of salinity problems before our livestock will. Okay, anybody see what's in the picture here? Do we want that guy in our private well and our drinking water? Okay, so remember, a water well, from the time water enters the pump at the bottom of your hole until it comes out the tap at the house, a well is supposed to be a closed loop system. By that I mean this guy that's in the middle of this photo should not be able and should not be in your well. There should not be, unless there's a breach in the casing or a breach in a water line going to the house, this guy should not be in your drinking water. Okay, roots. I would think in y'all's area, there's lots of trees, there's lots of things going on. Some of the shallow wells, because y'all do have shallow water tables there. Roots can be a problem, but they may not be a problem for a while. As long as the pump is good and below this root mass that's in the picture, we don't have any problems. Our problem comes when the pump goes out, we have issues with the well, and we need to pull the pump out to replace it. So we hit this root mass and we can't pull through that. It breaks the pump off. It falls to the bottom of the hole. We don't have the problem anymore, but we just lost a pump down in the bottom of our well hole. So that's where the issue comes up. Okay, leaks in our casing. Again, could be a problem, may not be a problem. Out in the hill country, most of our water is pretty decent. We don't have a whole lot of saline water, none of the salt water. So the water that comes into our well column, it may be not as good a quality as other water there. In y'all's area, if you have a leak in a piece of casing, you may have some saltwater intrusion coming into your well. So your water went from really good quality, got a hole in there, a pinpoint hole, where it's got some salt water coming in. So the quality went from really good to salty. So the leaks are not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on what the quality of the water where the leak occurred. So again, could be good, could be bad. It may take your well, if they're both good, good drinking water quality, it may have taken your well from 20 gallons per minute to 25 gallons per minute because the extra water is entering the well column. So could be a really good problem to have. Okay, another picture of some leaks. As you can tell, this looks like a cased hole. Ever wondered what the inside of a piece of PVC looks like? Looks pretty much like the outside, except when you're looking at a well, every 20 feet you get to see that nice purple ring where you cemented them together. Okay, those of you that have wells, hope you have a well house, but I hope it does not look like this picture. Okay, there's multiple things going on. If you look towards the center of the picture to the left, you see where the casing comes out of the ground, where you've got your pump saver. So this is where the water starts. The big silver thing is your pressure tank. The issues I see inside this well house are pump up sprayer for chemicals. I see a gas can sitting on top of some trash bags. I see paint. I see debris on the floor. Okay, so as bipolar as our weather has been across Texas for the last few months, going from, I mean, here in College Station, we're going from 40s to 70s, a couple of weeks ago. So every mouse, snake, bug is looking for a warm spot in the evening and looking for a warm spot in the afternoon. So if they're out there moving around in your well house, they disturb that trash bag where the gas can's on. Gas can falls off of that bag. Boom. I see the spout right there. It's going to be right on top of your wellhead. It could pour gasoline. If that's not a great airtight seal, everything is weatherproof. It could pour gasoline down into your aquifer, into your well, and contaminate everything you've got there. Okay, same thing with the pesticide container there. We do not need pesticides around this. We've got a good concrete floor. We've got an enclosure, so we don't need the containers. We don't need the paint fumes. The problem I see with all the debris, the chairs and different things on the floor here, again, during the cool weather, snakes are looking for a good place to stay warm. Mice are looking for the same thing. They're all looking for food. We go into this well house, move those chairs out of the way. The snake slithers out at us, and I hurt myself trying to get away from that guy because me and snakes don't get along very well. So if this is your well house, I would recommend pick it up, clean it up, move the paint, the chemicals, the gas into the barn, into the garage, anywhere away from our wellhead, because we do not want these possible sources of contamination to hurt our aquifer and to hurt that $30,000, $40,000 well that we've got. So another place in the barn away from this. Y'all's weather doesn't get as bad as it does in North Texas, but it's always easier to winterize our well early. So, September, October, it's time to start thinking about getting the well house ready for winter and making sure that everything is cleaned up, put away, so that we do not have issues. It's always easier to prevent winterization problems than to try to fix them, because if you've got luck like I do, Snowmageddon 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever all those water lines started breaking, it was cold outside, and cold and wet are something that just don't mix very well. We like to prevent those problems instead of having to get wet when it's freezing outside. That's just never any fun. Also, I'd recommend that we get a licensed well installer or pump installer to come out and look at our plumbing occasionally, just to make sure everything is good. Because knowing folks across Texas, whenever all Snowmageddon hit and we had busted water lines and issues, a lot of us went out and got every half-inch fitting and every three-quarter-inch fitting we had in the garage. We went out there and fixed our water lines because you told us to, wife, and said, hey, we need water. I need laundry to be done. We've got to be able to flush the toilets, fix this stuff. So us guys went out to the barn and we got every fitting we have. We fixed the water line. It works, but it looks like some great Aggie engineering. So, great, but a little sketchy at times. So we need somebody to come in occasionally to fix that Aggie engineering and make sure everything is not necessarily up to code, but everything works appropriately and all the valves are doing what you think they're supposed to be doing. And if you sold the property, the next people can figure out what the heck is going on. Okay, water well testing, frequently asked questions that we do get. How often should a well be tested? And again, we're looking at bacteria as the main test that we would like to get tested, and we want to do that annually. Okay, bacteria, E. coli bacteria, coliform bacteria, we want to do annually. If we see E. coli in a well, we want to make sure that we're not using that as our drinking water supply, or we get the problem fixed before we go back to drinking it. Okay, we also recommend with our Texas Well Owner Network program, every few years we get general chemistry such as nitrates and salts looked at. They don't change just a whole lot over time. Bacteria can change rather quickly. And we will recommend as frequently as needed for other contaminants of concern. My guidelines would be if you see a change in color, odor, or taste of your well water, it's time to get it tested and get somebody to look at it, because those are indicators that something is not up to code or up to norm. So we want to make sure we change. Okay, getting a water test for E. coli should be less than $30. A lot of the health labs can do that. The program I've got we travel around the state of Texas, so we're not in Brazoria County regularly, but we try to get out and around. So if we come in, it's going to cost about $15 for us to run the test. Again, we look at the E. coli, we look at coliform bacteria, nitrates, TDS. So in certain locations across Texas, we do have arsenic issues within the aquifers. So we do test for that as well. But less than $30 to get an E. coli test. They're at a local health lab, being around Harris County and Fort Bend County. I know there's several labs that are in that area that can do those tests for you. Okay, so drinking water testing. Here's a website with Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It has drinking water labs. The problem with their list of labs is they're just alphabetical, and there's other states that are included in it. But this is a good set of certified labs across the state of Texas that you can get those water samples to, that they can do those tests for you. Now, if you want to get your water tested for just general chemistry, I would recommend that you send a sample to the soil, water, and forage testing lab here on campus at A&M. I'm sure many of y'all, if you're master naturalists or master gardeners, y'all know what the soil, water, and forage testing lab does. They do your soil samples for you. Also do water samples. Now, the thing about them is they do not test for bacteria, but they will test for other things. So as you can see on the list, they do calcium, magnesium, potassium, boron, hardness, conductivity, pH, iron, zinc, copper. So lots of things. So general chemistry, if you're growing a garden and you've had your soil tested, everything looks good with the soil, but your garden still is not reacting and doing what you would like it to do, one thing that you may do is send a water sample to the lab and make sure that your water is not too salty for the plants you're trying to grow, or trying to, you know, excuse me, explore other options. If it's not the soil, it could be some water issues. So if you're having problems, I would recommend sending a sample to the water lab here on campus. Okay, routine analysis, you can see here, nitrates, hardness, pH, sodium, calcium. The metals, maybe something that you would be interested in looking at, zinc, iron, copper. So just something to keep in mind. Relatively cheap. A routine analysis is $25. If you put the metals in there, it's up to $40. So again, to know what's going on with your water, kind of like your soil, it's a pretty good investment to make sure everything is looking good. So this is the fecal coliform or fecal bacteria guy that we do not want in our well. It's a microscopic organism found in the feces of humans and other warm-blooded animals. Really not harmful by themselves, but we use them as indicator organisms to indicate the presence of pathogenic bacteria, viruses, parasites. Again, your well should be a closed loop system. This guy should not be in the well. The way we would get in there with some of your shallower type wells, when you get the hurricanes, when you get things going on and the water tables are disturbed and water lines get broke, this is how this little guy gets in there. Okay, fecal coliform, E. coli are very simple tests for us to do. We have a mobile lab that we come out and set up our testing whenever we come to y'all's areas or to any area across the state. Okay, the other thing that we would like to make you think about a little bit is if you're on a private water well, chances are you are on a private septic system as well. Okay, so we want to make sure that you inspect the septic system annually, make sure everything is going. Okay, so here's another thought question for you. On your piece of property, I know y'all are pretty flat out there, don't have a whole lot of rolling hills, no mountains, but if you've got a little bit of slope to your property, would you prefer to have your water well or your septic tank on the high part of your property? And would you want the septic or water well? Which one would you want on high spot? Which one would you want on low spot? Okay, we all know everything flows downhill from across Brazoria County. Everything flows from Fort Bend County through Brazoria County to the Gulf. So everything flows kind of in that southeast direction, flowing downhill. So always want the well on the highest point of property. You want the septic downhill. And again, if I was going to drill in Brazoria County, I would kind of want my septic kind of southeast of where my well is at. So if we do have an issue, everything does flow away from my well. We don't have contamination issues. Okay, if you've got that septic system, we want to make sure that you do pump it out every 3 to 5 years or as needed. If you're just a single couple living there, you may be able to go 7 to 8 to 10 years. If you've got a family of 5 or 6 or 7, you may have to do it every 2 to 3 years. So just depending on how much you're inputting into the septic, we just need to make sure we are alert and aware of what's going on and that the septic is functioning properly and as recommended. Okay, reduce or avoid the use of the garbage disposal. Don't put everything down the garbage disposal for your septic. It kind of throws the microbes and the balance out of that septic. So not always a good thing to use garbage disposal when you've got the septic system. Okay, whenever we do our T1 program, Texas Well Owner Network, we have 2 different kinds of programs. I've got a 1-hour program and I've got a 4-hour program. So the 4-hour program, we actually have a septic expert that comes with us. We talk an hour on this kind of the information we're talking about now. We talk an hour on septic systems and what needs to happen with those. We talk water quality issues and we talk water treatment issues. So our septic expert says, whenever you've got that septic tank, don't use a lot of volume of water that's going to have to go through and be treated in your septic. And by that, he means don't use 1 day a week as the only laundry day that you do and pump in 10 loads of laundry on Saturday. All that water flushes into your septic. Hopefully you've got a gray line that goes from the washing machine out into the yard or something, but don't get all the water going into your septic because that much fresh water, gray water, really throws the balance of a septic off. You know, the main point of a septic is for the wastewater to be treated and then it goes through the system. So again, don't pump paints and chemicals and things down the toilet. Our septic guy always says your homework after this program is to go home, use the restroom, and that feeds your septic everything that it needs. He's heard all kinds of additives and things that you can add to a septic. He says those really don't do a whole lot of good. If you see a label that says septic safe, that does not necessarily mean it is safe and helps your septic system. He says that means that it can be flushed down a 3-inch sewer pipe and it will flow through that. So keep that in mind. Just because it says septic safe does not mean it is feeding or helping the microbes within your system. It just goes down the line. Okay, protect that drain field from damage. Remember that the drain field is there for a reason. It does not need to be under the driveway, under the sidewalk. It is there for leaching purposes so that your septic tank does not overfill. It's not the parking lot. It really doesn't need to be the water supply underneath your garden. So protect that thing and try not to do crazy stuff with it. Okay, separation from your water well and your septic tank is a minimum of 50 feet, and we want to also be 100 feet from our water well and the drain or spray field of the septic. Okay, sources of bacteria. Humans are the major #1 source. Again, we want to be 50 feet separation from our water well to our septic tank. We do not want the picture on the right where we've got water pooling up, coming possibly septic. So not a good situation to have. 100 feet off of the well for drain or spray field. Okay, livestock can also be an issue. We want to make sure that the livestock is a minimum of 150 feet away from our well, downslope from the well. Again, common sense tells us that everything needs to be downhill on the property from our water well. Okay, so I'm going to give you another thing that I didn't think of a while ago. When you get a water well drilled on your property, you get to choose where that well is. When a well driller comes into your property, he's going to want to pull the rig in, find the easiest place to drill a hole and put a hole in and be gone. Okay, whenever you're paying, whatever you're paying for it, $30,000, $40,000 to have a well drilled, you get to choose the location. So if he says it should be right here in the middle of the property, but that's where your wife wants to build the new house whenever y'all move out to the property, don't let him drill the well there. Put the well wherever you want it and be able to put the house where your wife wants it. So always be smart, guys. Do the right thing. Okay, another good source of bacteria. We love him, but our domestic animals do produce lots of feces, and they can contaminate our wells if they're too close, especially in some of our shallower well fields. They're probably close to the coast. Okay, we want a minimum 150 feet separation from pens, yards, runs to keep our domestic pets away from that water well. Okay, why should we be concerned with nitrates? Methemoglobinemia, or blue baby syndrome, is what happens when the nitrate levels get too high in our water wells. So again, you can read here, symptoms of that: blueness, breathing difficulty, and vomiting. So what it does is the oxygen gets tied up in the blood because of the high nitrate levels, and that gives that blueness. Pregnant nursing women, infants, elderly with suppressed immune system are highly susceptible to high nitrates. So this is something that we want to watch. It is something that can be, nitrates can be taken out with reverse osmosis systems. So there are cures for it, but we just need to know we've got the problem to be able to fix the problem. Okay, sources of nitrates. Again, it could be coming out of our septic if we don't have an airtight or a tight enclosed system where we have a breach in a water line. We could be having nitrate issues. Same thing, 50 feet from our septic, 100 feet from our drain field. Like, fertilizer is one of the major issues that cause nitrate levels. We want to make sure we're 150 feet away from those fields with our well, our drinking water. Now, we understand that if you've got center pivots or you've got irrigation systems, that's not feasible at times. So, but that's typically not going to be our primary drinking water supply. That is our cropping system, irrigation system. Okay. Animal waste we need to stay away from. 150 feet separation for pets, livestock. Wildlife had no guidelines. I would think in Brazoria County, you may have a little bit of wildlife issue. You probably got a wild hog or two running through that county. So no guidelines, but we want to make sure that those wild hogs cannot get close to our wellhead and get close to contaminating. We know how much damage they can do, so try to make sure that you keep them as far away from our well as possible. Okay, the TDS, or total dissolved solids, basically it is the level of dissolved minerals, including salts, that are found within our water. More than 500 parts per million, the water begins to taste salty to us as humans. Sodium is often referred to as a measure of salinity, most common cause of high TDS in Texas. And again, y'all are in a aquifer there, Gulf Coast aquifer, that is susceptible to some salinity issues. So your water may be in that 500 range. Here in College Station, we are right there at 500. So new people that come into the community don't like our water very much. They say it does taste salty to them. So the salinity tolerance for plants, 0 to 175 part per million, excellent, no risk to plants. If you get in that 175 to 525, sensitive plants don't like it. By sensitive, we're talking about some of the vegetable crops. Tomatoes don't like salinity. That would be a major one. So, you see anything over 1400 to 2100, intolerant plants are not going to do well. So that could explain a lot about what's going on with your garden. Okay, animals, 0 to 3,000 is okay for all livestock. When you get up in that 49 to 6,900, a lot of those animals do not like it. They will drink it, but it's not good for the pregnant, lactating animals. Again, if you've got in that 3,000 range, you may not have to put your salt and mineral blocks out there in the pasture for the cattle or for the sheep or goats, because they may be getting enough salt out of the water to cover all of the necessities that they may have. Okay, water treatment, it can be an issue, trying to get some of the salt out of the water, trying to get some of the hydrogen sulfide to get the iron out. So one of the places that you can look for water treatment specialist is Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. There at the bottom of the page, occupational licensing for the commission. We'll bring you to this page, and we're going to do a group search. And we're going to look for water treatment specialist, and we want to make sure we look at the Water treatment specialist 3. We want to, again, you can either go by city, zip code, county. I kind of broadened it out and went by the Houston region. When we do that, we come up with 85 records of folks that are water treatment specialists across y'all's region. Now, some of these people are going to be guys and gals that work at the water supply or the septic places or the sewer system there for the county or for the city. So they may not be guys that are trying to sell water treatment devices to you, but they could be. Okay, so remember, whenever if you have water treatment issues that you want to resolve and you call, hopefully this crowd knows the Culligan man. If you call the Culligan man and get them to come out and look at your water and try to take the salt out of it, remember that they are trying to sell you a product and you may need that product, but they're going to try to sell you the Cadillac version and not the Volkswagen version, and you may need somewhere in the middle of that. So always be very diligent about what they talk you into and about what you purchase, because they are salesmen that could try to sell more than what you really need for your system. When you're talking about treatment for a household, you need to think about if you want to be treated for the whole house, or if you want just a point of use like the kitchen sink where you're going to be using a majority of your water for the cooking. So if you could get by with a point of use instead of doing the whole house, you're talking about a lot cheaper system. So think through the whole gamut of products and things that they're telling you. Don't just go with the first thing they try to sell you, again, because they might try to sell you the Cadillac version instead of, you just need the Chevy version. So just be very diligent, ask lots of questions. Okay, so a few maintenance tips that I want to make sure that you do think about. We want to make sure that you keep all records. Again, keep that well log. If you don't have that, I would go back and search for it. If you get any kind of water test done, you want to make sure that I recommend that you get a folder, you put the well log in it, you put any kind of water test information in it, maintenance and repair information, put it all there. If you sell your piece of property, leave that folder with the property, because you don't need that well information anymore. You don't live there. If you've bought a house recently that has a well on it and you did not get a well log or any kind of maintenance or repair information, how wonderful would it have been to move into that house, walk in there on the bar, and the well log's there, the maintenance information, and all the pertinent stuff for that water well? Wouldn't that have been great? So be the nice guys and gals that you are. And if you sell your property or you give it to the kids, give them all that well information, because they will really appreciate it. They don't know how much they would, but eventually they will appreciate it. Okay, make sure that you don't store fertilizers, pesticides, oils, paints around the well. We showed you the picture a while ago. We kind of explained that. Keep the area around the well clean and accessible. Make sure that you see the picture. It says don't spray around the well, but I'm going to tell you, spray a little bit around there. Keep the grasses away from it. If you don't, you're going to have fire ant issues. You're going to have possibly snakes, mice, bugs around the well. So you want to keep it clean and debris free so that you know what's going on. A water well and your septic system, the pumps for those, they have a little bit of electricity. They have a little bit of heat around them a lot of times. Fire ants and bugs, are wasp, hornets, those things are attracted to those electrical sources. So anytime you go around your well and open up that well box, make sure that you check for wasp and fire ants before you start opening stuff up, because they can be around there. Okay, so I want to tell you, make sure that you do a monthly thorough visual inspection for cracks, gaps, or in the caps, soil disturbance, anything going on inside your well house or around your well. If it's dry all the time and then you go in there all of a sudden and everything is wet, that means you probably have a leak. A fitting may be leaking. Hopefully it's nothing major. But if you see something that's going on, again, it's easier to fix small problems than to fix large problems. And again, I would say every so often, 5 to 10 years, get a licensed person to come out there and fix the things that we have Aggie engineered back together. So just something that I would recommend. Okay. I would think in Brazoria County, there's probably a few abandoned wells. If you see those, we need to make sure that we do address that. If you got them on your property, you are liable for any kind of injury or any kind of aquifer damage that is done. So we want to make sure that those wells are capped or plugged. Okay, should a well be plugged or capped? A well that has not been in use should be plugged. However, if the well is not deteriorated, has good casing, the pump is still good, the column is still good, you may want to cap that well. I'm going to say if you've got a well that still has water in it, the casing is still good, you never want to plug that thing, put a cap on it, because at some point the well that you're using today may go bad, and if you've got one already drilled there, you save yourself a fortune by not having to drill a new well. So capping is always a great thing. If it's a dry hole, definitely we want to plug, we don't want to cap. Okay, who should plug the well? Well drillers or pump installers can do that job. However, a landowner may plug a well with less than 100 feet of standing water within that well, but the contractor will have better equipment and the understanding of the geology that affects how that well should be plugged. So we can do that, but we may not plug it all the way from the bottom of the hole all the way up to the top because we don't have the equipment to pump the concrete down into or the bentonite. So the pump installers, well drillers do a much, much better thorough job than what we can as a individual. Okay. We also need to make sure if we do plug a well, we need to file a plug-in report with the Groundwater Conservation District, and we need to file a plug-in report with the Texas Department of License and Regulation. Those are state regulations. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that have occurred during this. Hopefully we got a little bit of useful information out of this tonight.
All right, thank you for that great presentation.
Okay, so I see in here, looks like Brazoria County has a water testing lab, so that's good to know. So somebody asked or said, I mentioned $30,000 to $40,000 to drill a well. It may be different than that in Brazoria County. I know out in the hill country, it's $25 to $30 a foot to drill a well. So by the time you get everything drilled and get a pump and get all the equipment done with it, it typically runs, in that $20,000 to $30,000 range. So I'm not sure what the actual cost per foot is in Brazoria County, but I would think it's probably in that $25 to $30 to $35 a foot. So wells are not cheap. The problem with a well is you get to see 1 foot of pipe sticking out of the ground and a little bit of concrete around it. So for a major investment, you just don't get to see just a whole lot of what's underground.
Another question, they're asking about using Ridex in the septic system.
So our septic expert says there's lots of things that they say do lots of things. If you go to the bathroom and do what you're supposed to do and keep regular, your septic keeps regular. It says that really that stuff does, a lot of times it will do more harm than it will do good. If we're doing our business with our septic, that's all it needs. That gives it all the food and keeps it as regular as it needs to be.
All right, are there any more questions? Here's your opportunity to ask. I am not seeing any questions. I see a hand up. Mike, if you can put your comment or question in the chat box, I'll read that to Dr. Pigg. Mike's asking about what about disinfecting a well?
That's always a good option. If we, our recommendation typically is if we see E. coli bacteria in a well, then we will recommend that we disinfect it. Um, the whole deal we would like to say is if you're going to disinfect a well, make sure that there's a set of guidelines that we have on our Texas Well Owner Network website to make sure that you follow those recommendations, because if you don't do it correct, then you're really not doing, you're not going to do any good for yourself. You have to make sure that we disinfect the well and the pipes and going into the house. So there's a procedure that needs to be followed to make sure that we are actually doing what we're intending to do. So I would suggest if you're thinking about disinfecting, we do have on the Texas, go to twon.tamu.edu and look at that publication. It'll kind of go through some step by step. It'll make sure that you're putting the correct amount of bleach in there. So I would recommend going there to make sure we do it properly and correctly. But it is a good, viable option, especially for y'all's area whenever we have flooding situations where freshwater inundation into our well. Anything that comes from the surface and gets in that well could cause contamination issues. So chlorination is a really good thing that can happen after a flood.
All right. Let's see. There's someone has complimented you, said outstanding presentation. Actually, I've seen a couple of those. There's another question that has come in. How can someone find out the source of salt in the well water?
That's an interesting question. So I'm thinking of a lot of the water that's salt water that would be in y'all's wells is just part of the aquifer. So it is, because y'all are in the Gulf Coast, which is actually, it's the underground part of the Gulf, and it goes in several counties. So a lot of it is just saltwater intrusion from the Gulf of Mexico. So it may be something that would be my first indication. We would need to look at, if we need to take that water out, that's where we might look at reverse osmosis system to take some of the salt out for those wells. But generally speaking, it comes straight from the aquifers where your problem is happening with the Gulf Coast aquifer.
I know that during our floods, well, just not Missouri County, but a lot of the surrounding counties that didn't have a water testing lab, Missouri County was charging those folks to bring samples, have their water tested. But for local well owners, they were testing bacteriological for free.
Right. That's great service. Great service.
Yeah, it really was. It helped out a lot of people.
Yes. And
let's see.
So John has asked me if our program is going to come to Brazoria County. I'm going to work with John and your other county extension agents there in Brazoria County and see if we can't get the Texas Well Owner Network program into Brazoria County here in the next few months. So we will work together and try to come to y'all's area if you have a well.
Yeah, and Ryan has spent a lot of time here.
Ryan Gerlich with the septic.
Yes. Okay. He's done several workshops, so really important as well. And yeah, we do have one or two pigs down here.
I would imagine y'all have several.
Well, thank you so much. I don't see any more questions, but that was an excellent presentation. And if we can get y'all down here, that would be great. If not this year, next year, that would be excellent. And just a wealth of information. Thank you so much for your time and for your presentation.
Thank y'all for having me. If y'all have questions that you think of, you can always reach out j-pig@tamu. Be happy to answer questions. So feel free to email me. Be happy to visit with you. So y'all have a great evening. Thank y'all for inviting me out to speak with y'all.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Y'all too.
All right, that concludes our presentation. Before y'all run off, I just wanted to remind everyone, in case you missed it, we will have a Water Wednesdays in June. However, it will not be in the evening. We're having Lance Wood, who's a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, give a presentation to our Master Naturalist chapter. And they're meeting at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So it will be in the morning. However, I will record the presentation if you can't make it in that time frame, and then I will send that link out to those that wish to view that. But he's going to do an overview of the 2023 hurricane forecast and provide some information that would be pertinent to pretty much anyone if you're in the coastal counties, but even inland as well. So it should be a great presentation with a lot of good information. But here again, I will send out that registration link for all of you to be able to register like you did tonight. And then you're welcome to join us for our chapter meeting and hang on. You're also welcome to share that link with others. People that you may know, friends and family that have an interest in what the forecast will be for the season coming up. And with that, I'm going to wish y'all all a good evening. We concluded a little bit early, but that's never a bad thing. And also, if y'all need, I will digest this recording and I will be posting it. So you'll get a link to that once I get done editing it if I need to do that. Yes, it will be on the 14th. So it's not on the third Wednesday. It will be on the 14th of June. So different time, different day, but you will get that information. But I didn't want y'all that have been faithfully attending to get a surprise. So I'm kind of being preemptive and letting you all know that there's going to be a slight change in schedule. And then for July and August, we will go back to our normally scheduled programming. All right. Thank y'all so much. Have a great evening, all.